Good evening. My name is Lauren Anderson, and I'm the Manager of Alumni Relations at Johnson & Wales University. Thank you for joining us for our program, Wellness for Everyone. We're excited to bring this program to you and look forward to learning more about the mind-body connection and how we can all improve our overall wellness with self-care and nutritional practices. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. With the exception of the presenters, all participants have been muted. Set your view to side-by-side speaker view to see both presenter and presentation optimally. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen and we will answer them in the Q&A portion. I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Dr. Mary Dias and Chef Skylar Hanka. Dr. Mary Dias is a proud JWU alum, earning her educational doctorate in higher education leadership in 2003. She is a professor of clinical mental health in the Master of Science program here at JWU. Dias is a nationally board certified counselor, holds a fellow in thanatology, and is certified in both grief counseling and complicated grief. She is a certified death doula and has a certificate in psychological autopsy. She is the director of Grace Point Grief Center in North Kingstown, Rhode Island, and she is the author of Grief Speak Volume 1, Stories of Loss. Chef Skylar Hanka earned her bachelor's in culinary nutrition from JWU Denver in 2015. Her philosophy around health and wellness is deeply rooted in food as medicine, as she emphasizes the connection between food, farming, and health in the US. She is currently finishing a master's in integrative clinical nutrition. She holds a degree from the Culinary Institute of America and a didactic program in dietetics. She is also a certified functional health coach and partners with clients who wish to focus on their gut health, mindfulness, and self-care as it relates to all realms of their health and wellness. In the kitchen, she offers a conscious, restorative, and functional approach to cooking, an approach that she has cultivated during her years of teaching culinary classes, working in farm-to-table restaurants, and managing her own health imbalances. When she isn't reading research articles and completing graduate work, you'll find her out foraging and hiking and soaking up some energy from the sun. We are so fortunate to have Mary and Sky lead this discussion, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Mary Dias to lead us off.
Well, good Thursday evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight. So when I was asked to do this, I started to think about how often I stress self-care in my classes because, you know, the research on anybody who's doing any kind of therapeutic work is that there's a very high burnout rate. And then I kind of own that. I always thought it's really our occupation, our experience. And then I started looking at the burnout rate of other occupations, and they're all high. So really, it's important to talk about wellness in general. Like, what is wellness? It's really a lifestyle. You know, we all, you know, New Year's Day comes along and we decide that, oh, we have all these resolutions. I want to lose weight. I want to start exercising. I want to get outside more. But it doesn't need to be a resolution that we feel, oh, I don't know, compelled to do, but more of a lifestyle change. And many of us have had lifestyle changes, whether we wanted to or not, and whether good or bad, because of the quarantine and because of the pandemic. But when we talk about wellness, we talk about self-care, and it's an active process. This is underlined by me. It's an active process of making our mind and body a pleasant place to inhabit, and by filling our own cup first. And I know oftentimes that sounds selfish, but it does ensure that we have enough to give other people. And we know that, you know, in our hearts, we know that that's the case, but we kind of forget. It's a practice. It's not only an active process, but it's a practice of taking an active role in protecting our own well-being and happiness, and particularly during periods of stress. I often say, if we could only treat people, if we only treat ourselves, rather, the way we treat other people, we never stop and think about that. We're so good generally to other people. But when it comes to ourselves, we kind of put ourselves at the bottom of the rung. And it's not selfish, because it's really important to keep ourselves centered in every area that we're thinking of. And of course, when we look at, again, if we only treat ourselves like we treat others, look what happens when we want to take care of ourselves. We have to take a step back. And no, all of this it's not rocket science, but it entails issues that we know, but we don't practice. That's why I was emphasizing practice on the first slide. We have to take a step back and look at what is happening, because sometimes we just get so overwhelmed with what is happening that we can't, see the forest through the trees, so to speak. We're also very hesitant to ask for help. We're the first ones to be there to help other people, but we feel that sometimes it's a failure on our part if we ask anybody else for help. We should be able to do this ourselves. No, we shouldn't. We should all ask for help. Spending time alone, as I said earlier, whether we wanted to or not, a lot of us spent a lot of time alone during the pandemic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that going on, about the lack of social support, lack of communication, and lack of touch. But also there is something very positive about spending time alone, because it gives you some breathing space and it gives you time to step back. It allows you an opportunity to step back and look at the bigger picture, what's going on. Again, putting yourself first. It's not selfish. It's actually selfless when you think about it. But so many of us have been brought up thinking, selfish is a bad word. And the connotation is, but if you think about what it really means, it means taking care of yourself first. Asking what you need. That is so important. I find both with students and colleagues and clients that they really have a hard time asking for what they need, sometimes because they have no idea what they need. We might, think about what we want, but what we really, really need, and that need might be, I need to be in the company of others. I need to have time alone. I need to take care of myself. And that word, it's a big, heavy word, but it's so important. And so many of us are reticent to even think about what we need. Wow. Setting boundaries. Oh my goodness. This is such a huge issue. As important as communication is, and as important as touch is, we oftentimes find ourselves in the process of trying to help others that the boundaries get very blurred, and we go above and beyond and do a little bit too much for other people. We want to always empower people, but not enable them. Because if we enable people in the process, what we do is we allow them to remain in that kind of victim mentality of they can't do anything themselves. And we don't want that. We want to empower them, to give them the skills to help them do for themselves. We also sometimes have trouble setting boundaries where we just are having a bad day and we don't really filter what we're sharing with other people. And sometimes we share a little bit too much and then, are very upset afterwards, saying, why did I tell that person all of my business? Ask a stylist or a bartender what they know about people's lives, and it's absolutely amazing. I can be in a 15 or less item line in the grocery store. So it's express. You think you're going to be in and out. And sometimes the person in front of me, by the time I leave, I know, that their daughter is getting divorced and she's just been diagnosed with cancer, and the son-in-law is struggling with addiction. I don't need to know all that in 3 seconds. So that's what we mean about setting boundaries, and also physical boundaries too. People want us, people need us. When we set boundaries, we have the ability to say no. Saying no. How many of us who are listening to this right now just have a really hard time saying no to someone? We don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to seem like we're not available. We want people to lean on us. And so that is definitely, aligned with the boundaries and saying no. Staying at home, well, that would have been apropos prior to the pandemic, but right now it is, people are tired of staying home. They want to be out, but once life gets back to normal, we're going to forget about that. And we're going to forget how home can be a safe place that allows us to do all of these things that are on this self-care piece, to be able to spend time alone, to think about what we need, putting ourselves first, and forgiving ourselves. That is another huge issue. I sigh because I feel the weight on my chest when I say that, because I think of all the people that I work with that have such a struggle forgiving themselves. They beat themselves up. Guilt is rampant. And we know in the field of emotions that guilt is a wasteful emotion. It's a waste of energy. One should never feel guilty. And if we can't forgive ourselves, we carry that weight with us. So I often say to my clients, not only do you have to forgive yourself, but first you have to give yourself permission to forgive yourself, because they struggle even with giving themselves permission. Now, on the next slide, excuse me, think about it. Who puts the oxygen mask on first when we're flying an airplane and the altitude drops? We know what the protocol is. We put it on ourselves first, before even a child, because if we can't take care of ourselves, we can't help the child. And really, that's what self-care is all about. It's not selfishness. It's taking care of ourselves first before we try to help anybody else, because we're not going to be any good for anyone else if we haven't taken time for ourselves. Look at this mind-body connection. This, every time I look at this, it floors me, because stress is so rampant. The most expressed issue going into any kind of therapy is anxiety, which is associated with stress, and depression. Anxiety and depression, regardless if they come in for career counseling, if they come in for grief counseling, if they come in for relationship issues. If you break all the content down, it comes down to stress. And look at the ramifications of stress here. I mean, just quickly, when you're under stress, you have headaches, infections, muscle twitches. You have problems with Charlie horses in your calves. You get rashes. Sometimes you have trouble with breathlessness. I always tell my clients, and I specialize in grief and end of life, that grief is like the most painful thing that one can go through, especially the loss of a child. And there's really not a whole lot you can do about it when you're suffering acute grief. There's acute and there's chronic, just like there's acute appendicitis and chronic appendicitis. And so at the acute phase, the only thing that we have in our favor to be able to deal with this onslaught of grief is taking care of ourselves, because grief will attack our immune system. And so many people get sick with physical grief because they don't deal with the emotional grief. So at the same time, when all this is happening in your body, look to what is happening in our minds. We worry, our thinking gets all muddled. That's why we need time alone. That's why we need to think about what we need. We have impaired judgment because we're so overwhelmed that we can't narrow things down and look at what we do have control over. We have nightmares. We are very indecisive about things. We're afraid we're going to make the wrong decision. We tend to be very negative. And if we make a decision, instead of getting kind of immersed in it, we just make a hasty one without any thought. Also, with emotions, when we're under stress, we have a loss of confidence. More fussy sounds like a baby, but sometimes we are fussy. We can get more agitated or irritable, jumping down someone's throat, using that expression, because of something they said, like, are you hungry? Can I get you something? And we jump down their throats. Depression is very much it's a common bedfellow of anxiety and stress. They tend to go together. And sometimes we can just be apathetic. We just don't care anymore, which is a very sad place to be. We sometimes in that process alienate other people. We don't want to get engaged with other people, and we're very apprehensive. So you can see with this mind-body connection that what happens in the mind, the worrying, is connected to the headaches, is connected with the irritability and the depression. And then what happens is it leads to how we act. So the behaviors that are involved while all of this is going on, we tend to be accident prone. We lose things, we drop things, we trip over things that we normally wouldn't do. Sometimes we have a loss of appetite, or sometimes we just have too much of an appetite. Loss of sex drive, we're just disinterested. More substance abuse, because it's easier to, self-medicate than to really deal with what's going on. Sometimes we have insomnia. We toss and turn and we can't sleep, and we're very restless. And if we're smokers, we smoke more. So just look at this for a minute and think of the onslaught that is coming at us when we're under stress. You could be in a traffic jam, which there's nothing you can do about, and you're late for an appointment, which there's nothing you can do about except maybe text them saying, I'm in a traffic jam. But all of this starts to happen. So you start to get a headache, you might break out in a rash, your judgment is impaired, you're irritable, and you go home and drink more. That is obviously not self-care. So what we want to do is we want to go by this protocol of the wellness wheel. Now, this is well researched, it's well embraced in the field. And again, if we go back to the first slide, when I said to you, wellness is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. It is not a piece. And one of the things I want to point out to you with this wellness wheel, excuse me, I've been talking all day, is that they're all equal. I invite and encourage all of you to try to draw your own wellness wheel and see if they are equal, or do you spend more time in one than another? Because you should spend as much time with each one of these sections of these dimensions of wellness. So I'm going to start with the emotional one. So emotional wellness, the wheel talks about our ability to cope effectively with life and create satisfying relationships. Oftentimes when we think of emotional wellness, we think of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is aligned with what the wellness wheel says about emotional wellness, but it's different in that one of the major components of emotional intelligence is impulse control. And emotional intelligence really is one's ability to regulate our own emotions and the emotions of others. So emotional wellness is thinking and talking about how we manage our emotions. There's something in the field of emotional intelligence called an amygdala hijack. And the amygdala is that part of our brain that fear is in, and also emotions themselves. And sometimes we have our amygdala or our emotions get hijacked and we don't think cognitively or rationally. So in order to avoid an amygdala hijack, because it only takes about 10 seconds to avoid an amygdala hijack. So it's almost like inhale, exhale, take that breath, clear it, and your mind will switch out, will not allow the amygdala to be hijacked, and you're able to kind of touch base with your neocortex, which is your rational cognitive part of your brain. The second piece of wellness is financial, and a lot of people would not even, that wouldn't come to mind. What is your financial wellness? And it could be, you know, getting ready for retirement, or it could be, you know, did you lose your job during COVID? Has your job requirements changed or the salary changed? How did you spend your money during that process? People really overspent in a lot of areas. I read that during the quarantine, the amount of bicycles, kayaks, anything that goes on the water, lawn furniture, grills, people were just spending an inordinate amount of money because they had to stay home and they wanted to make that as, you know, as comfortable as possible, and not thinking about it. But I also just read that this holiday season, there was the highest amount of credit card debt. Because people were just so excited to finally be able to celebrate the holiday that they went all out and buying gifts, and now we're sitting in there with a pile of bills. So there is a health, there is financial health that we need to be aware of. And again, I stress, these are all the same size. Social. Now, we just talked about, and it's not a contradiction, it's when we're dealing with stress and we're feeling overwhelmed that we need to take time alone, stay home, and kind of process what's going on. But we know since the pandemic how important, because we had lack of it, how important social support was and how important touch is. You know, when we're talking to other people, something happens in our brain, and the person that we're speaking with or someone who's speaking to us, the neurons in their brain mirror our own. So if we're, and that's what's so positive about therapy, is because the therapist is in a very non-judgmental, empathetic state, and the client unknowingly, their brain begins to mirror the neurons of that. And so they pick up on that. There's some amazing studies done with PET scans of people prior to having a strong social bonds and then subsequent to without any medication. And their brain, the PET scans are completely different from within 6 months. So that's pretty astounding with the mirror neurons. The other thing is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is connected to our compassion response. So and interestingly enough, and I suspect that Sky is going to talk a little bit more about this, that the vagus nerve is really a pair of nerves that extend from the belly, from the brain to the belly. And for those of you who don't know, we do have a belly brain, which is very similar to this brain in that we have the same neurotransmitters and everything. And the vagus nerve passes by the heart. So we know that social bonds are extremely important to maintain a sense of normalcy, a sense of well-being, a connection with our world. We often find, this is somewhat of a non sequitur, but we also find that one of the methods, or one of the reasons behind Durkheim's research on suicide, says that lack of social bonds can cause people to say, you know, no one's going to miss me. I don't have any relationships. So I think more and more of us are trying to get involved in more social bonds, and we recognize that we've been without them, especially on Zoom. If most of our work has gone to Zoom, that, you know, this is not real communication and no ability to touch. And I know even teaching, my students all have to wear masks, as do I. And that's also kind of breaks down the ability for mirror neurons and for that, that vagus nerve. Spiritual is for some people, it's religion. Those of us who have a higher power in our lives, whether it's Jesus Christ, God, Buddha, etc., we know that there's a sense of peace in having a belief in a higher power. The sense of spirituality can be connected to where we're connected to the universe. In fact, there's an overlap between spiritual and environmental. I'm thinking about Sky's bio. You might find her out foraging or soaking up the sun. The universe or nature can be your higher power. And we know how important that is and how it changes our bodies and our minds when we're out in nature. So we want to be able to have some kind of connection with our world and connection with our universe. The fifth area or dimension is occupational, and my goodness, I could spend hours talking about that, and I'm sure everyone listening could do the same, again, because of COVID. And think of the amount of people who didn't come back into the workforce. I kind of think they went through some kind of insightful process and decided that their wellness wheel was way too big in occupational and much smaller in the other areas. And they kind of maybe decided it wasn't worth it, or they threw the baby out with the bathwater and said, you know what, I'm just not going to go back to work, and I'm going to concentrate on all these self-care things that I need to do. But finding spirituality, meditating, all of that is essential in this wellness wheel. Physical for me is the biggest one in wellness, because there, as I said, there's a direct connection between what happens when we have any physical activities and what happens to our brain and our bodies. So I know when the quarantine, I'm a swimmer. So when I'm stressed, or I have to do this on a regular basis, I have to go to the gym and do laps until I'm breathing normally and everything that was on my mind is left in the pool. So I went into a whole anxiety mode when the gym closed down. And then I just thought, wait a minute, I'm always saying I don't want to enable people, I want to empower them. So I'm going to empower myself. And I'm fortunate enough to have a pool at home, but heating the pool is cost prohibitive, talking about financial wellness. So I tried to think outside the box, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. So for the first time in my life, I bought a wetsuit, and I did the laps outside in my pool in 55-degree water. But I was able to achieve what I wanted to achieve, because I knew how important it was to me to do that physical piece. For some people, it's a walk. For other people, it's, to go hiking or skiing. I cannot wait till the snowstorm coming. I have all my sleds and everything going. And for other things, I read a study, and John Hopkins said that 25% of new AFib, fibrillation in the heart, 25% of new AFib cases come from people who are depressed. So that once again, you have the mind-body connection, that this can happen. If you're depressed, you're more likely to experience AFib. We also know that for those of you who are cutting carbs, that lowers your serotonin level, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain that's associated with well-being. And low serotonin levels are also associated with depression. So that's something else that physical and nutritional stuff interact with the mind. And as I mentioned before, there is physical grief where people get sick. I have clients who have gotten shingles, who have gotten COVID, who have gotten a lot of things because their immune system is so beat down by the emotional onslaught of grief that it manifests itself physically. For some of us, we got COVID puppies, which I did. And we know having a pet is a reciprocal benefit to us, that when we touch a pet, It releases cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and it increases dopamine, which is our feel-good hormone, but it does the same thing for the dog as well. So that's kind of awesome that, and it forces me, and it forces many people who ran out to get COVID puppies. It forces us to take them for walks, and then it increases our relationship or our well-being with nature and social environment and our emotional well-being. Now, you probably wouldn't think that intellectual was part of wellness, but recognizing creative abilities and finding ways to expand them. Intellectual, when we talk about intellect, you probably know about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. And so intelligence is just not just IQ or reading scholarly articles. It's artistic, it's musical, it's all of those abilities. And we know that that is a great outlet for people to express themselves in wellness. Yay, Hector. We'll talk later what you got. Mine just turned 1. So yes, we should be involved in our endeavors. I did get an app to learn how to play the piano, and I'm trying desperately to learn. So that was another thing. So, COVID had its benefits as well as its onslaughts. It's some people just, it was DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Instacart, and they just did not eat healthily. And we know that's also nutrition. Sky's going to tell us more about that nutrition is very important to well-being. And some people got really into the opposite of getting all natural, healthy foods and cooking a lot and all of that. So that was very helpful as well. And cooking is also, you wouldn't think it's an intellectual endeavor, but it is, because it's a creative opportunity. And then finally, in the wellness wheel is environmental. Good health by occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support well-being. I remember a client saying to me, I cannot go into, she was referring to a particular place, because the air, just the air in the room stifles me, that I feel like I'm breathing in bad air of depression, because the person who lives in the space that she was talking about was very depressed. You could feel that in the air. And the wellness wheel is not specifically talking about that, but like I talked about the traffic, that is an environmental factor. Clean air is an environmental factor. You want to, one of the things I find that when someone comes into me and who's feeling chaos in their mind, that oftentimes I'll say, well, for homework, what I want you to do is I want you to go home and straighten out all your kitchen cupboards. And just the process of straightening out something in our environment allows us to our mind to slow down and straighten out in the chaos. But, what did Nietzsche say? Out of chaos comes order. So it depends on how you feel about that. So generally speaking, I've been talking about what happens when we're under stress, how it affects the mind, the emotions, the behavior, and the body. Take care of yourself first, just like you would if you were on an airplane. Think of that image all the time, that selfishness is not a bad thing, that we have to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of everyone else. Learn to say no, learn to give yourself permission to be who you are without the expectations of other people to define ourselves, and draw your own wellness wheel to see which one is bigger than another, and in the hopes that they'll all become equal in this journey to become whole and to be well in general, in terms of the size of everything, and to pursue this as a lifestyle from here on in. And I am more than happy to now introduce to you Skylar, who's going to get more specific about nutrition as in its importance in wellness, and also what happens with the body. Thank you all for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I loved, just to expand on what we've been talking about, the connection between external inputs in our environment, whether that be stress or anything like that, and how that impacts our mental health, and then how that eventually manifests itself physically in our body. And as you can see, I kind of have another example of a wellness wheel, and then kind of just like some general systems in the human body to show that everything is connected, all of those different wellness kind of realms that we talked about encapsulated in a whole is similar to our body, because none of the systems, organs, anything in our body is separate from the other. They all communicate with each other. They all interact with each other. And that's something that in the past, medicine has really liked to take apart things. And now we're realizing, oh, well, if we really want to cultivate wellness and we really want to be healthy or figure out what healthy means to us, we have to understand that all of these things are interacting and talking with each other. And just kind of going into the wellness as a lifestyle for a moment, I think I'd really, love to know, and for y'all to ask yourselves right now, like, what does wellness really mean to you? What does that look like to you? What does it feel like to you? For me, wellness is about cultivating a lifestyle where I can move through the ebbs and flow of being stressed or feeling happy, and without having my baseline health shift a lot. And I think that's a very optimal way to envision like healthy living and wellness, is understanding how to utilize those self-care tools, understanding how to utilize nutrition, understanding how to utilize physical activity, like all of those little tools that we can to cultivate wellness for ourselves. So that way, when life does throw us a curveball, we're not going to get thrown off the path, or we're not going to get sick all the time or things along that line. And so I kind of wanted to touch base before going into some of the nutrition factors, some of the ways that you could potentially use this wellness wheel, as Mary was talking about, like creating one of your own. And it's really fun to do an activity where you create one of your own and then rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 in each of those little realms. And just take a moment to look and ask yourself, in the realms that you rated higher, why did you rate that an 8 and not a 4? Or why did you rate it a 9 and not a 10? And think to yourself, what strengths am I utilizing in those areas of my life that I can apply into the other realms that maybe I'm struggling with? So this is kind of getting into some of the health coaching and really how you can apply the wellness wheel into your lifestyle and your habits and your self-care, and help you kind of identify different goals that you may have around your health, or different ways that you can really support your wellness. Because let's get real, we're all going to have our own, vision of wellness in our life. What it looks like for me may be different for what it looks like for you, because we all have different values and different things that we like to utilize to make us feel better in terms of self-care. Moving on to kind of the next slide to talk more about nutrition for wellness. So this is something that I love talking about. I just love talking about nutrition, and Mary touched on it a bit too. So like the gut-brain connection, that's something that is huge right now in the world of nutrition, because we're realizing that our gut microbiome shapes not only our immunity, but it can impact our mental health, will impact the microbes in our gut, which impacts the rest of our body and can influence things like nutrient absorption. It can influence our weight. It can influence our hormones. But again, this is a multi-directional process. So there's no like one baseline thing. And I'm saying that in a way where it's like, oh, like if I'm sad, then that's going to impact my gut health and I'm not absorbing nutrients. Well, it could be the other way around too, where maybe my gut health is compromised, and because of that, I'm not absorbing nutrients, and that in turn is impacting my mental health. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but at the end of the day, there really are some like basic core ways that we can use nutrition to just overall positively influence our health and our body. So I've kind of outlined a few of them here for you. And one of the big ones is just kind of remove the word dieting from your brain. We're just going to put that one away. And I think it's huge to talk about coming into the new year too, because we always have those like diet goals and diet plans, and I'm going to get on a diet. But at the end of the day, it's like, we don't want to be on and off diets all the time. We want to cultivate a meal plan or, dietary protocol or eating style that's beneficial to us and supports our health and wellness and our goals. And so kind of going into that, you can think about like, how do you want to feel? Because as we've already kind of touched on how everything impacts each other, what you eat will impact how you feel. And on other way around, how we feel can impact what we eat, especially if we're stressed or we're grieving and then we're craving carbohydrates and we're craving those comfort foods. It all kind of works back and forth. But in terms of cultivating a more conscious approach to eating where we're really, being a bit more mindful about what we're putting in our body, then we can in turn do things that help us reduce inflammation and cultivate a better gut health, which can support our immunity and things along that line as well. And so a lot of kind of core eating for just general wellness is focusing on quality and focusing on incorporating like mindful eating into your meal plans. And so when I say quality, it in turns means a lot of whole fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are going to be kind of the main topic as you see people going more plant-based, more vegan and vegetarian now. And that's because they contain specific phytonutrients. They also contain lots of vitamins and minerals, and they contain fiber, and those phytonutrients and the fiber as well help support our gut microbiome that I talked about. So within those, there's prebiotic compounds and probiotic compounds, and those essentially feed all of the healthy gut bacteria in our gut, which in turn is going to help our body process a little bit better. It's going to help support things like that nutrient absorption and assimilation I talked about, which in turn is going to help support our mental health and reduce inflammation around the body. There's also lean proteins is another kind of good place to start too, in terms of looking at, your nutrition as a whole. Lean proteins include things like chicken, shrimp, salmon's another good one because it has a lot of omega-3s in it, and omega-3s help support our brain health too. They actually help lower anxiety as well. I know, Mary, when we were talking about this, and formulating what we were going to talk about, she had mentioned this study about them giving omega-3 supplements to inmates, and that reducing the amount of like fights and aggravation that was going on in the prison. So there are specific supplements that we can talk about in terms of like mental health and immunity, what can support them. So like omega-3 is a good one. Vitamin D is another really good one. That's one that has been shown to support and help lower anxiety, to support people with depression. There's also B vitamins, which are really important. And I say all B vitamins, not just B12. B12 is, essential, but all of those trace B vitamins help actually support our energy production cycle way more than B12 does. So B1, 2, 3, like all of those guys really help support our energy production. So with a lot of people who feel sluggish or feel like they're not making it through their day or they're crashing in the afternoon, B vitamins are great. I could go off about supplements for a long time because it's a whole nother realm to dive in. I'll definitely be able to answer any questions about them. But one thing as a functional nutritionist that we like to focus on is trying to get most of your nutrition through food first, and then addressing any kind of supplements later. So kind of going back to like those core food plan tips of like just eating whole fruits and vegetables, looking at the quality of your food, having a relationship with your food in terms of where you're getting your food from. Are you going to the farmer's market? Are you visiting the produce aisle of your grocery store, and really exploring that as well? I put in healthy fats in here. So again, that's like those omega-3s, and in the whole foods, that would be like avocados and nuts and seeds and those little tips as well. Foods that are low in added sugars. So of course we can't escape processed foods, but in terms of eating for optimal health or eating for mental health and immunity, fresh whole foods are always going to be our best friend versus processed foods like foods high in sugar, foods high in added trans fats. Those are going to cause inflammation. They're going to cause us not to feel as good. We want to kind of lessen those and push those out and welcome all the beautiful, colorful foods. One thing that I did put in here too was like eating more mindfully. So that's something that really ties back to the self-care thing. So mindfulness and awareness, they're basically kind of the same thing in a sense, because if you're not aware, how can you be mindful? And if we're moving through our food each day and not maybe taking a moment to show some gratitude for what we're eating, or we're eating in the car on the way to work, or we're, shoveling our food down at lunch, a lot of stuff can go on in our bodies if we're hastily moving through our relationship with our food. And so taking a moment to really tune in when you're eating your meals, maybe planning out your meals a little bit better, is just some nice tips to help cultivate a little bit more mindfulness around food, which is actually going to help your body absorb that food better. It's going to give your body a chance to, understand, hey, it's mealtime. I'm going to switch to digesting my food and taking a little break and not, rush through things. Overall, just, nutrition to support wellness is going to be completely personalized to your lifestyle. It's going to completely be personalized to your work schedule. But at the end of the day, these are just a few little tips that you can use to start cultivating and looking how to tweak your current dietary intake into something that's maybe going to help support you a little bit better and serve you a little bit more. So really looking at your food timing when you're eating every day, looking at the quality of your food. Are you eating more whole fruits and vegetables, or are you eating more processed foods? And looking at, where you are when you're eating, how you feel, and taking a moment to maybe have some gratitude with that, and really just cultivating more awareness in that experience. On the side of this, I put kind of a little box. So a lot of my nutritional training is through the Institute for Functional Medicine. So we like to talk about food in 4 different realms. So food being information. So food actually is information for our cells in our body. It tells them what to do. It gives us, it interacts basically with our genome. So essentially, when you think about people being predisposed to specific health disparities such as cardiovascular disease, lung disease, et cetera, the food you eat will impact your risk of developing those. Food is also medicine, so thinking medical nutrition therapy. Food is also energy, obviously, because without it, we're not going to feel very good. But food's also connection too. And Mary talked about this as well, as like our social connection, and food's part of that as well. Eating dinner with family and friends, and how that helps cultivate more wellness and more community too. Kind of moving on to our next slide. So just some quick little tips for lifestyle tips for wellness, and how you could integrate that into your life is looking at, what does self-care look like to you? Is that meditation? Is that daily movement? Is it, time with your kids and your family? And I think it's really important to understand that self-care doesn't necessarily have to be something that you go purchase or you go buy. Because I was talking to my sister about this, and I was like, what do you do for self-care? And she's like, oh, I get my nails done. I get a massage. And she has 3 kids and is married and all this stuff. And I was like, no, what do you do for self-care? That's not something that you need to go spend money on. Do you take a moment to yourself before you put the kids down just to breathe and maybe do a little body scan check-in? There's many ways to incorporate self-care in your life to help promote wellness and help to really connect to yourself and your values. And kind of the last thing I'll wrap up with is that when you are going through any kind of change, especially in the new year, when we're creating new habits and rituals, try to start small. SMART goals is a template that we use a lot in health coaching, where we, focus on building goals that are very specific, very measurable, goals that we know are obtainable, they're time bound, and they're realistic. And so, don't think you have to overhaul your whole diet just to start improving your health. Do little swaps. Maybe it's, I need to drink more water a day, and I'm going to drink 8 ounces with my breakfast and 8 ounces with my dinner. It can really be as simple as that starting out, and that could maybe make you go from night or day in terms of how you feel and your wellness. But kind of ending is just really focusing on building habits that last, making those small changes first to help cultivate more wellness in your life. And I'll kind of bring it back home here and open the space up just for any questions. And thank y'all.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We had one that came in and I think is a good lead off here. So what is each of your favorite ways to show self-care?
You want me to start, Skylar?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think number one, as I mentioned earlier, was swimming. My puppy has given me great self-care, and I would like to say that it was nutrition, and I guess I should talk to Skylar after this, because I have a lot of health problems, and so there's a lot of things that she's recommending that I can't eat. So I want to pick her brain. But I think for me, and reading. Reading is makes me feel good, and I do drink a ton of water. So that would be my response.
Yeah, I think mine's kind of similar too, is like definitely something physical. So I do a lot of hiking, a lot of time in nature. It just helps ground me. So I feel very connected with that. And then kind of other self-care for me focuses more on nourishment and making sure that I'm eating 3 meals a day and making sure that, you know, what I'm choosing is fueling me appropriately. And I think it's just, for me, self-care has really been focusing on, you know, what makes me feel good. And so kind of the foods that nourish my body and getting out and moving in nature.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, so what are some tips or techniques that you can recommend that help reduce stress?
Well, I have a couple of mantras, and one of them is, Mary, it's not cancer. So it just brings me down to the reality of how big is this issue? I'm making it much bigger than what it really is. For example, today, I was in the parking garage on campus, and when I left class and I knew I had this coming up, I couldn't find my car. And I couldn't that immediate stress response, like, okay, I'm going to hyperventilate, my chest is getting in knots, and then I just stop. And because I know I'm having an amygdala hijack, and I stop and say, okay, you're going to find this car. It's somewhere in this parking lot. Someone can help you. You might be a little bit late. So I immediately go to my rational part of my brain and talk myself through in order to stop the whole physical, flight or fight or freeze response.
Yeah, I would say that definitely is similar to what I would say is like cultivating that mindfulness or awareness. So doing something like a body scan or a meditation, and like meditation doesn't have to be like sitting down, crossing your legs. You can do any kind of meditation. I feel like I meditate when I cook. So the main thing that I would say is very similar, is just like cultivating that self-awareness to be able to switch your brain kind of from that fight or flight to being more centered and rationally process what's going on, or just giving yourself a little space to breathe.
Mm-hmm. So if I could just add to that for 1 minute, there is an exercise that works very well for me when I'm under stress, and it's color breathing. So I give my anxiety or stress a color, and I visualize myself breathing out that color every time I exhale, and breathe in the color I would like to feel. So whatever color I'm associating with, like today, when I was in the parking garage, I was breathing out orange because my anxiety was orange to me, and I was breathing in yellow. And it only takes, as Skylar was saying, you don't have to be sitting there like this. It only takes maybe 3 minutes of that breathing until you visualize, and your whole body is becoming less and less orange and more yellow until you're in that space.
That's fantastic. I haven't heard of that, but I know color association is key with a lot of things and reduction of stress. So
yes.
Awesome. So have either of you heard, or what do you recommend for daily movement whether it's time, amount per day, and how many days per week? Is there a certain amount that you recommend or have heard of for complementing wellness?
I could actually only speak to my own ritual. One of my students introduced me to laughter yoga. And I'm so I'm so happy that Sky talked about having fun, because one of the things that I didn't talk about in the social part of the wellness wheel is, like, be a kid. Be a kid, go sledding in the snowstorm. Don't think about, oh, I have to shovel. So, because I have the puppy, I walk her probably 1, 2, 3, 4 times a day, and for about 1.5 miles. And I swim anywhere, depending on my time, a 0.5 mile to 1 mile, a minimum 3 times a week. If I don't swim, I can feel it. I can feel it in my ability to deal with what's going on. I can feel it in my body. I'm tired because I didn't swim. And yeah, so that's walking and swimming. And I eat like 6 meals a day, very small meals during the day. So those are the things that's my practice overall. But Sky, you could probably speak to that more specifically.
Yeah, I mean, like, I love your practice. And I think that hits a really good point, is like, it's going to be different for everyone. And that's why, like, nutrition recommendations, these general guidelines for wellness and things like that can be really hard to interpret and navigate, because we're all different. And that's also, it's going to differ based on your goals as well. Like, if you're, if your wellness includes you putting on muscle mass, or maybe like you're training for a marathon or something, it's going to change. General recommendations are usually like, most average healthy people should be getting 2 to 3 days a week, minimal exercise for 30 minutes. And that's, maybe it's walking on a treadmill. It's something where you are going to physically exert yourself, but you're working up a sweat. Maybe you're getting a tiny bit out of breath. Like, it's going to be something that makes you move. But then again, maybe for someone else who is a little bit less mobile, maybe you're older, you're having troubles with arthritis or joint pain, correct or not correct, but like an optimal wellness activity regimen for you would be cleaning the house. Maybe you're cleaning the house for a couple of days a week, like 2 to 3 days, you decide you're going to mop stuff and move. So you really got to tailor it to yourself. But at the end of the day, think about your goals first, and then you can create more of a movement routine that's going to help you reach whatever kind of optimal health means to you.
Thank you. We got some praise in the chat. So wonderful recommendations and some really great inspiration coming from both of you. So thank you so much. I'm going to introduce Lori Zabata, the Director of Alumni Relations, to close us out.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you, Professor Dias and Chef Sky, for leading us in tonight's discussion. You shared some wonderful information to illustrate how we can achieve overall wellness in our mind and body. We've heard the term self-care a lot in the last couple of years, and it was wonderful to learn some tangible steps to take better care of ourselves. It was such an informative discussion, and we're grateful that you shared your time with us this evening. Your extensive knowledge and continued support of JWU students, as well as alumni programming, is also greatly appreciated. I'd like to thank the Alumni Relations team for their help behind the scenes, especially Lauren Anderson for her work to bring this program to us. Finally, thank you to all in attendance tonight. As alums, JWU provides a truly unique and exceptional education that prepares our students for future success. If you'd like to pay it forward, please consider making a gift to the College of Health and Wellness. Your gift will directly support students and educators as they pursue an integrative, multidisciplinary approach to health-related careers. And as an alumni donor, you'll also contribute to the growth of JWU's reputation, which increases the value of your own JWU degree. If you're in a position to give back, you can do so by clicking the link in the chat window. Thanks so much for your support. We sincerely hope that you enjoyed this evening's session, Wellness for Everyone, part of the JWU for You family of programming. Through JWU for You, alumni can engage in informative and interesting discussions related to professional development, social, and avid interest topics. For the full listing of upcoming events, please visit our events calendar at alumni.jwu.edu. Also, please be on the lookout for an email in the next few days containing a survey to collect your feedback on this program. We appreciate your attendance and wish you all a wonderful night. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Sky.
Thank you.
Great information.